Group at PureShaleFinancial.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Yesterday, yet another Trump lawyer pled out in the Fulton County, Atlanta case. Jenna Ellis. Yeah. She was one of the more public-facing members of the Trump legal defense team. You often saw her at pressers with Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani.
And she even spoke at our Freedom Summit last year, remember? The morning speaker.
Yeah. Well, here was her elocution in court yesterday.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court. As an attorney who is also a Christian, I take my responsibilities as a lawyer very seriously, and I endeavor to be a person of sound moral and ethical character in all of my dealings. In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse. For those failures of mine, Your Honor, I have taken responsibility already before the Colorado bar who censured me, and I now take responsibility before this court and apologize to the people of Georgia. Thank you.
In related stories with respect to the Trump trials, you have Mark Meadows getting an immunity deal in the Jan 6 case being prosecuted by Jack Smith. So ostensibly he plans to testify against Trump, or certainly Jack Smith thinks he has valuable information that the jury should hear in that case that would implicate Trump, one would suspect. But what are the political implications of elocutions and plea deals from Powell and Cheeseborough and Ellis and Meadows, for example? For more on this and other political matters, domestic and international, we're pleased to be joined again by Sean Spicer. Of course, he's a former White House spokesman, and he's the host of the Sean Spicer Show on Apple Podcasts. Sean, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always good to be with you, Dan, Amy. Good to be with you both.
Great to have you back. What's your handle on where things stand with the Trump trials and these plea deals?
So it's an interesting question, and I wish I'm sort of torn on several levels. One, on the personal level, I've been through a bunch of these court cases since Trump was in office, and I understand that some of these people have to do what they do because they get jammed by the Department of Justice or a local DA, and that the legal fees, et cetera, can mount. And you know, in Jenna's case, in Sidney Powell's case, they say, hey, you're facing 7, 8, 10, whatever felonies, but if you plead to this one misdemeanor, it's a fine and you get off. Right. So I get why they do the things they do. But I think what this really comes down to, and to the point of your question, what does it matter? I don't know, and I think we'll have to see. In other words, are they using Jenna Ellis to get to Rudy, then Rudy to get to Trump, or something like that? Because I don't know. In the case of Sidney, she was representing the president as his lawyer. There still is a maintenance of attorney-client privilege. So what do they get from her? I don't know. But at the end of the day, even Meadows, who apparently is testifying now, wrote in his own book that Trump never believed that the election was fair. He believed it was rigged. He wrote this in his book. So I have a hard time believing that you can turn around and say, okay, well, now that we pressed you with a bunch of fines and charges, what do you say now? And he says, I say different. Well, hey, if you're the Trump team, you go, well, this is what he wrote in his book. This is what he said, and he can never – and even according to the reports this morning from his own attorney, there's no specific instance in which he ever says, yeah, Trump said the following. This is all his speculation. I believe he knew. I believe. Well, that's not how we convict people in America. You don't get to say, I think that you're guilty. So, look, I don't know how this ends, but I'll tell you, I think no matter if you're the biggest Trump hater in the world, if you look at what they're really going after him on in a lot of these cases, you can say he's a bad person, you can say he's unethical, but he hasn't broken a law as far as I can tell. And that's the line that we have to be concerned with as Americans, is there are people that you may not like, there are people that you may despise or that you may think otherwise, and in some cases they may do nefarious things, but there's a line between that and actually breaking a law.
Do you think Meadows is going to plead out too?
Well, they gave him immunity, so I assume that he's got a deal. I mean, I would assume you don't take an immunity deal unless you have a deal. But again, I don't have all the particulars in that, so I don't know what they had on him. But I would assume that you wouldn't go that far unless you're getting something in exchange.
Well, and this too, I mean, we don't exactly know whose legal fees are being paid by Trump and whose aren't, but Jack Smith is pressing to call it obstruction, the paying of some people's legal fees, and of course, those nobody has to disclose that. So some may be, and they may be pleading out even if Trump has been picking up their legal fees because he spent something like $40 million since January of 2022 on 60 different law firms. So a lot of people are being represented and their legal fees are being taken care of, at least so far. But here's the other thing, too, to your point. Jenna and Sydney and Cheeseburger, they're still they're pleading out, as you say, path of least resistance, because even if Trump believed that the arguments that were advanced in court filings to seeking a recount of this batch of votes or in this particular district, even if he believed that they were long shots or maybe there wasn't a preponderance of the evidence to support their claim, and he said, "Oh, well, let's take a flyer. Let's see if we can get it anyway." Filing frivolous complaints in courts of law is not criminal. In point of fact, what usually happens, if it is so beyond the pale in terms of the frivolity of a particular complaint, the attorney faces sanctions, but never the client. And so they have to concoct this ridiculous racketeering scheme that was, I guess, memorialized by a conversation that you have to, interpret in the light least favorable to Trump. And even in that light, there's still nothing illegal about petitioning a Secretary of State. We think this and you think that, and we want you to do this. It wasn't we want you to do this or I'm going to commit a violent act against you. It was we want you to do this because we think it's right. Even if you didn't think it's right, that's not illegal.
Well, I mean, and that's the point I'm making, Dan, right, is that if you think about it, I've been involved in two close elections in my career, one in 1994 and one in 2000. And in every case, you petition the government. I mean, look at what they're charging. They're saying that yes, you're right. He called the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, and said, I need to find this many votes because I think that there's this many that have been fraudulently cast. He didn't say go out and manufacture the votes. He didn't say go out and change the vote. He said, I believe that there are people that voted illegally, that this process wasn't followed, and therefore all I need to find are this many. You don't need, I mean, that, again, this isn't about whether you like Trump or not. Look at what he said in context and then go back and put a blinder on that and say, what did Al Gore say after 2000? What did, I'm trying to think, there's a race in South Dakota before when John Thune ran against Tom Daschle. There was all of these races. There was one in Colorado where, like I said, I've been involved in two at the House side. It's you go out, you have teams that go out and say, okay, well, we've got evidence that, there are 5 people that shouldn't have voted that voted. We've got, we believe this clerk kept the voting machines open 2 hours longer than they were legally allowed to be, whatever. But that's why, nothing that Trump did was outside the system. They keep saying he was going to do this and he might have done that. Well, okay, that's great. That's all hypothetical. But at the end of the day, what did he do? He followed the system. He filed motions. He petitioned his government. He asked for redress. All of that is expressly allowed in our Constitution and under our system of government. So you may not like it, not you, obviously,
Yeah,
but I'm
right.
saying that
Yeah, right.
one may not like it. But what did he do? Because your point is exactly right. It wasn't like he said, okay, I'm not going to allow the transfer of power. I am going to change the vote. Yes, under the Constitution. I mean, look at there was a story yesterday that said that no labels, or at least I'm sorry, it wasn't that they said it. It was an accusation of a group called Third Way, a left-leaning group that said that the group No Labels that is supposedly putting up a potential unity ticket, that they want to spoil the election and throw it to the House of Representatives, right? And where they could then play a role. Well, wait a second. Isn't that election interference? Isn't that whatever? No, that's actually how the Constitution spells out how you would control a contested election. Would that be chaotic? Absolutely. But the point is that what they're saying is, we don't like it when we claim that we win, that you petition us, that you seek redress. I'm sorry. They've done it. They actually went to the floor in almost every year a Republican won. I can't actually think if they haven't done it ever, but in 2000 and 2004, Democrats went to the floor of the House of Representatives, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking.
Well, they claim the elections were
and they
illegitimate.
tried to block tried to block the electors. So they've done all these tactics. They just don't like that Trump did it. And that's the reality. And so I think that, like, thou protest too much. And at the end of the day, if you go through every one of these cases, they've jumped the shark. They've sort of been like, we're just going to play on the fact. I as a non-lawyer, I have a bunch of lawyers on my show all the time. And I'll say to them, okay, I don't understand how, like in the case of Alvin Bragg, if the statute of limitations has expired, how do you charge them? And they'll look at me and say, I don't know, because that's the law. And so I think that what you've seen is people like Letitia James, Fannie Willis in Georgia, Letitia obviously in New York, but basically say, you know what, let's take a gamble. Enough judges and enough people hate Trump so much. Let's just see what we can do.
Well, it's funny, too, because that's exactly what they're accusing Trump of doing. Right? I mean, that's the great irony of it. He took a flyer by accessing the courts of law. His arguments were rejected, and that's that. But they're in the position of being a prosecutor, and so they're particularly in the jurisdictions we're talking about, they're given wide deference from judges, and then they start to get plea agreements that to the untrained eye, well, there's got to be a there because why would these people plead out? And there's all kinds of reasons, as we've discussed, why they would. But I mean, so as per usual, it is righteous when they do it, and it is criminal when somebody else does it.
Well, and Dan, the thing is that it's beyond this. You think about when BLM protested, it was mostly peaceful and it was allowed, and you didn't have to have a mask, and you didn't have to, because it was their side. Every time there's an instance of outrage, of political discourse going, when Chuck Schumer said that we should surround the judges, I'm coming for you, Gorsuch, I'm coming for you. When Sheila Jackson Lee said that we should surround, Maxine Waters said that we should surround Trump appointees and make them feel the pain for being, but that's okay. Right, so that's the thing, is that these guys, when they cross the line, when they go over the top, when they call for violence, well, it's different. And that's the thing that it consistently amazes me, how the Democrats and the left have no problem with the hypocrisy that they preach.
I wanted to get your take, because you wrote a piece about it in The Hill on the upcoming Virginia elections next month, and potentially all these off presidential year elections in places like Virginia, New Jersey. Sometimes they're canaries in the coal mine of what will happen in the subsequent year, what the sort of the issues are, and the attitudes of a cross section of voters. And so you specifically zeroed in on the issue of abortion, and at least in Virginia, that the Democrats are trying to get one more election cycle out of Dobbs.
So it's not one, and here's the thing. I think that this election is coming to, Chicago, to all of Illinois, to the rest of the country, because they are test driving this message. Every ad that a Democrat is running in the Commonwealth of Virginia starts with, MAGA extremists are looking to take away your right to choose. It is a cookie cutter ad being run from everyone who is running from sheriff all the way up to state senate, which is the highest that's on the ballot right now. And and my point is this, and it starts in Virginia, but it goes throughout the country, is Republicans have decided to take a very defensive fetal position-esque, posture on this. We are sitting back saying, well, we're only this guilty on the issue. We only want to ban it up to 15 weeks or whatever. And my point is, why are we not putting Democrats on defense? In the Commonwealth of Virginia, our last governor, Ralph Northam, who is a doctor, literally said on radio, it's on audio tape on WTOP here in the Northern Virginia area, he said, we wait for the baby to come out, we resuscitate it if necessary, and then we let the parents make a decision about what to do. That's called murder. And I don't know why we are sitting back not making every Democrat answer for that position. Instead, we are trying to have a discussion amongst ourselves about what defensive posture is best, instead of going on offense and making Democrats answer for their own position. And there's a state senator, Tran, here in Virginia,
Tran,
that actually sponsored the legislation. And I'm like, this isn't just one errant comment. They acted on it. Why are we not putting them on defense? And yet they're all running around running these defensive ads saying, I only want to ban abortion up until the 15th week. It's like, dude, your opponent should be answering for the fact that their standard bearer wanted to kill a baby.
Yeah, I completely agree that Republicans need to be not spectators here. We need to be messaging on these issues. I would say the whole parental authority umbrella, if you will, the life issue, the gender identity mutilation issue, and parents being purposely left in the dark with respect to minor children, school choice. It should be all sort of being messaged now, so that in states that are swing states that are not going to be as easy to pick up as Louisiana or maybe even Kentucky, that we are winning the arguments now in advance of the 90-day sprint come next fall. And I agree with you. I don't think Republicans are doing enough to make the ground fertile for their arguments on these cultural issues.
Exactly. But the point is that we need to be on offense, not defense, on all these issues. And in Virginia, we had the great playbook. Glenn Youngkin, our governor, did a great job when he ran in 2021 of taking a cultural issue, education, when Terry McAuliffe made this massive gaffe about saying that parents shouldn't be involved, and jammed it down every Democrat's throat. Well, we should be doing the same thing now on abortion and saying, here's your position instead. When we know we have a winning playbook, we're taking a totally different view. And I think it's ridiculous.
Sean Spicer, former White House spokesman, host of the Sean Spicer Show on Apple Podcasts. Sean, thanks as always.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
It seems like every day economic news gets more and more sketchy. We're already seeing huge volatility in the stock market and a rapid erosion in the value of the U.S. dollar.